views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olson.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of After Hours AM. It is, of course, well, it's already April 9th, 2015. Where is this year going, Eric? Where is it going? Well, anyhow,
I don't know.
I know.
We blew right through April Fools and Easter, and my goodness, spring has sort of sprung in our area anyway. It's madness. And by the way, I heard that. I heard my name being uttered by a recorded female.
You did. You absolutely did. Well, of course, as always, I'm Joel Sturgis, your host, but now the new co-host of After Hours AM. After much deliberation, after much thought, now let's just be honest, who's the only guy that take the job? Eric Olson is now the newest co-host of After Hours AM. Welcome aboard, Eric.
Thanks. Just call me sucker.
Yeah.
No, I'm really excited. I really am. It's been so much fun filling in now and then. More often than not, actually. And
yeah,
really enjoyed it and having a great time. And I am in the chair.
Yes, it is yours now. It is absolutely yours. I gave you the keys and everything. You're legal. You got it. But, you know, Eric, it's been, I got to be honest, it's been a tough day on my end. Today, as many of my listeners know, it's a 1-year anniversary of my father's passing, and he lost his courageous battle of cancer 1 year ago. So it's been one of those heavy heart kind of days in this end. But the show must go on.
Very, very tough. And he was a young man from my perspective.
Yeah, 63 years old, unfortunately. Lost his battle again, but there's hope out there for others. There's lots of hope out there. I mean, there's breakthroughs every day in that front of research, and we just hope that sooner rather than later they come up with a darn cure.
It's tough. It's a disease that has really run so many people. Seems like America, especially the industrial world. It has been the number one killer for a long time now, and they've been making progress for 50, 60 years, but my goodness, there's still a long, long way to go. I guess the main thing they found is it's not just one disease. It's a whole spectrum of diseases that just kind of come under that heading. And that's why there's no one single cure. There's a whole bunch of different cures.
No, I've heard the rumor that there is a cure out there across the board like everybody else has over the years. Do you believe that?
No, I just don't think there's any way they could suppress something like that. That kind of fits into my whole conspiracy theory, and that is, it doesn't mean there aren't conspiracies, because clearly there are.
Look at JFK.
But
come on.
They come out. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I want to believe that the hardworking men and women at the American Cancer Society, which I did speak to them, and they are now on board with After Hours AM, we are going to run their stuff free of charge over here, the American Cancer Society. Get the word out so they can get a little help over there.
Absolutely. Excellent cause. And, they're a large nonprofit bureaucracy like any other large nonprofit bureaucracy. And I'm sure there's some waste and this and that. But certainly, for the most part, they are doing good.
They are. So, Eric, how has your week been, man? You been doing anything fun and exciting?
Well, I've been preparing maniacally, madly for my talk on music and the paranormal at the Kent Paranormal Weekend. And it is now upon us. It is Saturday and Sunday. And believe it or not, my talk is kicking off the whole event. So I got to be there set up, ready to go, revved up, primed at 10:30 in the morning.
Wow. And you are performing live too, aren't you?
I am, and that's the part I've really been practicing because, man, oh man, I will be naked to the world out there. Yeah, I'm going to play a guitar and sing a medley of spooky songs at the end of my talk.
That's
because,
all right.
You know why? Why not?
You're going to record it, and we're going to play that next week right here in After Hours.
Oh, I hope it'll be fun.
That's all right.
To relive the experience, I hope it'll be fun. Now, I've been working hard. It'll be fun. I'm charged. I'm excited. They won't know what hit them in that place.
Well, that's good. That's what you want to have happen. Either be so good they don't know what hit them, or be so bad they don't know what hit them. So
it'll be one or the other.
No, you're going to be great. I'm kidding, of course. You are going to be awesome. I know you will be. You're a guitarist, man. You have the knack. You have the knack.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, no, it'll be fun. I'm not worried about any one element. It's just I am piecing together 5 songs into an overall medley. So my only real concern is to kind of pull them together and make them feel like a single unit. The transitions, that may be where there's a little bit of roughness. But nonetheless, I am excited about it. It's really going to be fun. I've never done anything like this at all. And it just dawned on me, my goodness, there's no reason for me not to combine the things that I am most involved with at this point in my life, namely the paranormal and music. Because I'm in a band with my wife and daughter, and we have a great time.
I know you guys have a family band going on. You guys are almost
we're like the Partridge
Exactly.
family.
I was going to say, do you have a Danny Bonaducci on your hands? I mean, you got one of those hanging around?
No,
No
probably
bus?
we don't have the exact equivalent of a Danny. The only family members are my wife, older daughter, and I, and then we have 4 other people because we're like, a real band. But we have a ball. We play a bunch of different goofy bars here in the Cleveland area, and we just let it all hang out, and it's a lot of fun. But it's a whole different thing playing and singing by yourself.
Now, you used to do this professionally, didn't you? This was what you did for quite a while for a living.
Well, I was a DJ, certainly professionally, a live DJ, a music DJ, for club DJ and parties and all that. I did that for many, many, many
I think
years.
it was a strip club that you were the DJ at.
Every DJ has DJ'd a strip club. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. There are no DJs who have not DJ'd a strip club, as far as I know. I've never met one. Yeah, but going way back into my college and immediately after that, I was in a band, a professional quote-unquote band, and so I suppose you could say
I could just see you now, though. Hey, get your ones ready. Here comes Donna to the stage.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I don't know if I told you, but we're doing, of course, as part of my medley, I'm doing "Don't Fear the Reaper." So of course we have to reenact the cowbell from
the cowbell, huh?
The cowbell from the infamous SNL sketch. That's the song they're doing. I got a fever.
I'm telling you, fellas,
you're
gonna want that cowbell.
I just played that for you, just for you. I'll do it again for you.
I'm telling you, fellas, you're going to want that cowbell.
Just remember that. You're going to want that cowbell.
So what I'm going to do is right before I start that one, which I think is the 3rd song, I'm going to summon my wife, Dawn, who's going to be running the projector.
Poor Dawn.
And she's going to come dashing through the theater because she'll be in the back because she's got to run the projector from the back. for the pictures, to go
You
with
have
the
a
guitar.
beautiful and supportive wife. You are truly a lucky man.
I am a lucky man. So she's going to come charging up, and then she's going to start beating on that cowbell like there's no tomorrow.
Okay.
With energy and aplomb.
All right. Is she going to do the gyrations that they did on SNL?
Oh my God, yes.
Good. See, you can't do the cowbell without doing the gyrations that were done.
The combo pelvic thrust and twist.
You have to do that. I think there might even be a law in Kent. I'd have to look it up. But if you do don the cowbell, you have to do the whole twerking, if you will, thing.
I think you're right about Kent, because it is a college town.
Well, Kent is what happens in Kent stays in Kent. That's what I've heard a few times. So,
unless someone records it.
Well, yeah, then it follows you home. YouTube is everywhere. That's the bad part.
And of course, there'll be next week's show.
Oh, yes. I will be keeping my eyes and ears open for any news coming from that little event. And like I promised, we will be playing that next week right here in After Hours AM. After Hours AM's very own Eric Olson picking up the axe and playing us a little bit of tunage.
I will be doing some bashing. Just bashing.
Are you going to light it on fire when you're done, like do to Jimi Hendrix?
I was thinking about it, because think about this. The ending song, and remember, I'm doing this by myself, so it's all just pretty absurd, because the last song is the classic goth tune by Bauhaus, Bela Lugosi's Dead.
Oh,
so
man.
It's all this weird atmospheric stuff, and I'm going to have all kinds of reverb and echo on. I'll be making all these sounds with the guitar in that poor theater. It won't know it hit him, as I've already said.
Wow. Well, tonight, though, we have something really special. We are talking American Stonehenge tonight with Dennis Stone. It will be extremely, extremely interesting, because I've always thought that there were people before Chris Columbus, before maybe the Native Americans. I'm thinking it has a Celtic origin, to be honest with you. That's what I think it does.
Well, we do know the Vikings, of course, were here, or at least we're in Nova Scotia anyway. Way back, because they left some settlements, but that's a whole nother matter. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading, because I do get a lot of these archaeological things that come up along with all the paranormal and the UFOs and the cryptids and whatnot. And now they're starting to actually take it fairly seriously. It's been again, theory for a long time, but now they're starting to take it a little more seriously, that it's possible that the Chinese were here.
Interesting.
On the West Coast, of course.
But was there any little tags that said made in China?
There were, and there was laundry.
Okay. I'd be looking for that right away. Made in China.
Because again, we must defend all ethnic groups equally.
If we haven't done that, we haven't done our job.
God, no.
We don't want to leave anything on the table, but you got anything interesting in the hopper this week for news, Eric? Anything?
Oh, I
shaking?
do. And for those of you following along at home, if you care to, just cruise on over. If you're a Twitterer, or even if you're not, you can still go to it. Just go to @AMHaunted. That's the America's Most Haunted Twitter account, and follow along. First of all, Scarlett Johansson is in negotiations to star in the Universal remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon.
They're remaking that film? That's crazy.
They are remaking it. In fact, Universal is remaking basically everything. They are rebooting their entire classic monster series.
Why, though, Eric? Why would they do that? I mean, there are just some movies that are so sacred that they should not redo them.
I agree. There's simply no question about it. And interestingly enough, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, there were a couple of sequels. I think there were a total of 3, perhaps even 4 films in the series. But that original, that is really one of the very few that hasn't ever been remade or addressed or rebooted, or whatever term you want to use.
I know. Don't you hate that whole reboot term? We're going to reboot it.
Sadly, it comes from computers, of course, obviously. I mean, it has some meaning, I suppose, apart from either sequel or remake. In theory, a reboot is a reimagining. So you're not slavishly remaking it, you're rethinking it from that material. That may be perhaps too fine a point, but as I understand it, that is the distinction. So picture ScarJo flopping about the Black Lagoon, and she's not going to be in that white one piece, I'm guessing, that Julie Adams was in the 1954 version.
You know, Scarlett Johansson's a hot low number, man.
She is. She is, and
saying,
even
she was
she
hot.
just gave birth. She just gave birth, but she was already. I don't know how these women do it. These typically, actresses, celebrities. They just don't gain a whole lot of weight, or if they do, they just like barf it up along.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they do it because. Well, who was I watching the other day and he had to gain a bunch of weight for a movie? And it escapes me now, but it's unreal how they can gain a bunch of weight and then lose it almost right away. How their bodies can regenerate that way. I just don't get it. I can't do that, man. I look at a Twinkie and I gain weight.
It isn't healthy. It is absolutely not healthy to put on weight quickly like that, and certainly to take it off that quickly. And some of these actors and actresses who become known for that, the De Niros and of the world and whatnot, they admit they suffer. Their body suffers for it. Your body is not meant to go through that kind of drastic changing. I mean, even if you're just trying to lose weight in general, it's much, much better to do it gradually than to, starve yourself and flagellate yourself and cut off body parts just to hit that weight.
I would go out for perfection, but I'm just too darn good looking as it is. It would be just horrid. People follow me everywhere. I'm never doing that again.
You know what my wife says to me? If you had more hair, you'd just be dangerous.
If you had more hair, you'd be dangerous. There's nothing wrong with being bald. Bald is beautiful, my friend, because I am bald. I'm
what you would call strategically thinning.
You're follically challenged.
Yeah. Sadly, when I look at pictures from when the band is playing, so you got fairly intense light and it's backlighting and whatnot. Seen in that light, the colored and shadowed light, it doesn't look like I have any hair anyway.
Hey, did you hear? Speaking of no hair, I shouldn't say this. Segue: woman arrested for beating herself up. I just saw this. This just came over the AP. Woman in Chicago got arrested for beating herself up with a crowbar.
Oh my, she wasn't fooling around.
No, when two officers tried to calm Jenny Peak down, 33, she dropped the crowbar and started running. And they tackled her, of course. I'm sure they added a little bit to the beating.
They wrestled her to the ground, needless to say.
They probably looked at their billy clubs and said, there's a reason we got these.
And then they looked at her and said, whoa, you've done enough.
Yeah,
I guess
we swear we didn't beat her. We have the video to prove it.
Imagine that. Well, some people, they give themselves no slack whatsoever. All right, speaking of the media, another big announcement came out today, and we saw our first pictures and our first teaser for the new season of HBO's True Detective. And in the entire 2-minute teaser, there wasn't one smile.
Really? Not a happy bunch then.
There will be no smiling in season 2 of True Detective.
I've never seen that show.
Well, that first season, it was
I've heard
really
about it.
Something. I mean, it was an acting tour de force. Matthew McConaughey, of course, really turned in a pretty amazing performance. His character wasn't particularly likable. After a while, it's like,
wow. Have you ever met him in person?
No, I have not.
Yeah, he's not exactly my experience with him. The one time I did meet him, he was not the most likable person in the world. I could have just caught him on a bad day, but he was drinking at the time in a bar, so that could have something to do with it too.
Was he driving a Cadillac?
No, it was a Lincoln, man. It was a Lincoln.
Oh, a Lincoln. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what he's pimping
commercial?
now. I've been driving Lincoln long before
yeah, I
they
guess
asked
it
me
is.
to.
You can see how effective the commercial was. I thought it was a Cadillac.
Yeah, well, yeah, top-notch production value right there. I mean, it really caught my eye, too. No, but I haven't seen the show. I want to. I just haven't gotten around to it. I did hear it was a good show, though. I will have to check it out.
Very well done. And what they do is they start all over again with the next season. So there'll be no connection between last season and this season. This season's set in L.A., and the stars are Colin Farrell, Vince Vaughn, who looks very mean and intimidating. There will be no laughter from Vince Vaughn.
Well, he's a Minnesota boy, so he's got.
I did not know that.
Yes, he is from up here, or the Minnesota, and I actually knew him before he was famous.
He has had a tremendous career, and people forget that he actually started as became known first as a serious actor. He was in that remake of Psycho.
And did you ever see the movie Clay Pigeons with him in it? That's one to check out.
I don't know if I have
If you
seen
want to
that.
see his acting chops as a psycho, I mean, just as a weird actor and a good range, check out the movie Clay Pigeons. I do believe it's on Netflix. It's worth your time.
Very interesting. And man, did he used to be skinny. Have you seen his night?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he used to be quite the dude, man. I mean, the girls used to dig him. Come
He's
on.
tall,
yeah.
thin. Now he's less thin.
Well-
So yeah, he's the bad guy in it. He's a criminal. Everyone else is a cop. Colin Farrell's a cop. Rachel McAdams is a cop.
Wow.
And Taylor Kitsch, which is a bizarre name, he is also a cop. And the three cops are somehow in the middle of this story that breaks, and there's all. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, go check out the teaser. You can link to it from the @AM Haunted, or it's just on Rolling Stone too. You can go check.
Yeah, go to that little magazine. Will never make it anyway, so
Yeah,
Rolling
you know.
Stone magazine.
Rock and roll, what kind of
Yeah.
nonsense?
Gosh, whoever thought that would hang around?
It's a phase.
It'll pass in about 80 more years. Don't worry. Oh, but speaking of music, though, I listen to a lot of music because I unfortunately have to. I'm not digging the new music, and I heard one. It's been a while, but I heard it again. I hadn't heard it in a long time. It's called. What's it called? Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars.
Yes.
I don't like the song. I don't get what people like about it. Maybe I'm missing the boat, but it's just nothing special.
Well, the appeal is how true it is to its retro roots. So what they're trying to do is emulate the old James Brown reviews. They got the big horns. They got the super, uptown funk. It isn't really funk. It's more neo soul, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily call it funk. But I agree with you. I mean, I love Bruno Mars. He's the singer on it. He's not the official artist. It's a DJ, actually. But he is the singer. And I really do like his voice. And he can pull off James Brown like most people can't. But what I don't like really about the song is the arrangement. It's too long. There's too many parts. They could cut that thing in half, and it'd be a lot better.
Yes, I would agree with you. I mean, just, it wears its welcome out about 2 minutes into it.
Yeah, there's too many
okay,
stops.
All right, I get it now. Okay, yay. Exactly. Bring back Led Zeppelin. Come on.
Well, even Led Zeppelin tried their hand at soul-ish, or at least a retro kind of feel. They were really getting pretty experimental in their later years. They did a lot of material that was not just the heavy kind of proto grunge or metallic blues that they started off with. They were really quite an interesting and varied and creative entity.
You know what song that Led Zeppelin does that always gets me every time I hear it by their range is When the Levee Breaks.
I love When the Levee Breaks.
That song is about the perfect blues rock and roll song, if you ask me anyway. It's so dirge-like, but it doesn't get boring. And it's slow, but it's a groove that brings you in, that between the guitar and the harmonica.
And then, it keeps going. It sounds like it's never going to change. And then the chords change. And it's like a revelation. I agree with you. That is a great song. It's also a good blending of the tone and the music with the lyrics. It feels like you're in this downpour. And my God, that levee may break.
That's right. You know what? I'm going to leave you when the levee breaks. And when the levee breaks, I have nowhere to go. Why he's leaving her, I don't know. That would definitely suck. Any more? We got 5 minutes left before we have Dennis Stone from America's Most Haunted, America's Stonehenge coming on the show. I was thinking of the website, America's Most Haunted, which everybody should go over there and check that out as well.
America's Most Stonehenge. Yeah, in fact, I appreciate very much you bringing that up. Teresa, my co-author on America's Most Haunted and co-owner of the brand, she's been doing a really good job profiling some of the speakers who are going to be at the Kent Paranormal Weekend. She's done George Norrie, and who else did she do? A local...
She's done George Norrie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, good old George. Yep, he was the first one she profiled. There's 3 or 4 profiles, so it's cool. Go check them out and get the background on those who will be speaking, I suppose, especially if you're going to attend, which I recommend to all. There are still tickets for Saturday and Sunday. If you're anywhere near Northeast Ohio, that is going to be a lot of fun. Ghost hunting, ghost walks, many, many, many speakers.
And rock and roll.
And rock and roll. All right, so here's the news story. As I'm sure you know, man, if we look to the skies, there's just been so many space stories. If you are a space travel aficionado, or just simply a space aficionado, this is the absolute golden age. There's just so many different things going on. They're making so many discoveries, and with the telescopes, it's just amazing. So here's the latest discovery about Mars. They keep finding more and more and more and more. It's looking more and more likely, or at least possible, that there is some form of life still to this day on Mars, because now they're finding that Mars, or they found, has extensive belts of glaciers all over the planet. And what has protected them, unlike other water that is simply evaporated because Mars essentially has no atmosphere, so there's nothing to hold the water in, so it just dissipates. And even ice, which it mostly is, of course, or exclusively is, they don't know yet. They think there may be some melting that does go on. As far as they know now, though, it is ice. But even that just evaporates into gas and does not go through the water stage. But what's protecting these glaciers, which they do believe is frozen water, is that layer, that icky layer of red Martian dust sits on top of the glaciers. So they are protected. And there's speculation that there could be some, especially very salty, liquid water on Mars.
Interesting. A related story, I bought a telescope once, and my wife says, "Why'd you buy that telescope?" And I said, "So I can see Uranus."
I have never heard a Uranus joke I didn't like.
That they never get old. They never
really
get old.
Don't. And every time I think about the Klingons circling Uranus, it just brings a smile to my mouth.
My inner juvenile, middle school boy comes out and just has to giggle a little bit. That's all. Come on.
It's really a shame that there's not a black hole on Uranus.
I'm going to leave that one alone because I could go so many places with that, and I choose not to. I choose to be the adult radio host here for a second. But that being said,
you're a big boy.
We got to run the break, everybody. We come back. We have Dennis Stone, and we're talking American Stonehenge. Don't go anywhere. Be right back after this.
Cancer patients can't afford a place to stay when the best treatment is far from home. A room shouldn't be the difference between life and death. Let's make sure that everyone who needs a room gets one. Let's make some noise. Let's help the American Cancer Society finish the fight.
Text ROOM to 41518 to donate $10.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
Hello, this is Joel Sturgis, one of your hosts of After Hours AM, and I'm here to tell you all about Planet Paranormal. Planet Paranormal is the place that you can hear every single After Hours AM podcast right from the very, very beginning. So tune in over at www.planetparanormal.com. That's right, planetparanormal.com. You'll be extremely glad you did.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
I heard on the news about that 5-year-old who found his uncle's gun. The kid didn't know it was loaded.
I heard on the news about that 14-year-old girl who was bullied online. For like a year, she couldn't take it anymore, so she got her dad's gun from his nightstand.
I heard on the news about that guy who broke into someone's house, stole a gun from the hall closet.
He accidentally shot his cousin in the head.
She killed herself.
And later, killed the owner of the store he was trying to rob.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Only in the forest can you see this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. And you might just see this. Visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com. And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and as always with me, my other
Eric
half.
Olson.
That's right. Eric Olson is co-hosting, or co-host now. Eric Olson is with me tonight. And again, Eric, welcome aboard. It has been really, really fun having you with us and having you on the show. But tonight, we are talking everything America's Stonehenge with Dennis Stone. Now,
No relation.
No relation. But America's Stonehenge is really a neat thing. I mean, everyone scratches their head at it. And we got the guy that knows everything there is to know about this place because he owns it. He knows it. He runs it. He does everything. Dennis, welcome to After Hours AM.
Oh, thank you, Joe and Eric. Thank you for having me on this evening.
Yeah, not a problem. You know, looking at this whole Stonehenge thing, now, we talked earlier today, and it's quite a strange formation. Now, I kind of have my feelings on what's going on, but what have you uncovered owning a piece of property like this? Who do you think actually made the Stonehenge?
Well, that's a million-dollar question, of course. We've been studying it since the 1930s. My family got involved with it about 60 years ago. And the evidence seemed to suggest that it might be old world visitors to the New World coming across the Atlantic Ocean. And the style of the construction of the site looks very reminiscent of what you'll find in some of the megalithic sites in Europe. There's something like 50,000 of them. Stonehenge is the best known, of course. Everybody knows about Stonehenge. But there's a lot of chambers, all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and standing stones, of course. And our site has a very close, it looks very, very similar to a lot of these, the size, shape, orientation of the structures. And so we feel it might be an old world answer to who built the site. We're still studying it to really get the answer, actually. It's still out there, the question's still there. But we're still researching it.
Yeah, because some people, I've heard some people tell me, getting ready for the show, that his human sacrifice might have taken place there.
Yeah, we just don't know. There's a large slab. It's one of the main features of the site. It's very interesting. It's a stone that weighs about 4.5 tons. It's kind of shaped like a bell if you look down at it, like a large bell. And it's about 1 foot thick, about 9 feet long approximately, and about 6 feet wide. And on the surface of it, it's been carved a large rectangular groove with a runoff or runnel. And it sits up on 4 legs. And right adjacent to this large stone is a chamber called the Oracle Chamber, which is very interesting in its own right. But connecting the two is actually a horizontal tube. It runs about 7 or 8 feet, and we have the actual measurements of it. It's a horizontal tube about 1 foot by 1 foot approximately, and it connects the table to the Oracle Chamber. And it's possible it was used for some sort of ceremonial purposes, including sacrifice. It would hold certainly an animal or a person on top of it.
Oh.
We just don't have the archaeological, evidence of it, but it certainly looks like that.
And that would explain the lack of virgins in your area.
Yeah. And then they moved away after they ran out, maybe.
Exactly. They ran out. They said, oh, boy, here's the deal. If you're a virgin... No, I'm kidding. I'm joking around. Yeah, we had to get out of here. It was horrible for us. No, but living there, though, being on the property as much as you are, you get a really firsthand, almost a spiritual encounter with the property. You get to know it so well. Would you say that this particular property has a really good vibe to it, or indifferent vibe, or where's it kind of, you go where I'm going, where I'm going with this, because some places just ooze a vibe.
It does have that feeling of being a kind of a special place. It's up high on a hill. And we think the site probably was a ceremonial site, a sacred site. And it does have that feeling about it. It doesn't seem to be a place where people would live, not a habitat site, but a place where people might worship. They would celebrate different holidays. They might watch a sunrise and sunset, moonrise and moonset. And visiting other sites around in Europe and in down in Mexico and in the southwest part of the United States, it seems to be that same kind of feeling to it. It's a very kind of a spiritual kind of place, a special place,
Exactly. It just has that feeling about it. Now, I know you have a lot of people come through. You have a lot of people from the universities come through to look it up, look at it, and try to figure it out. Do you have a lot of spiritualists that come through and kind of also try to figure things out?
Yeah, on a regular basis, people come through, spiritualists. We have psychics. We've been open to the public since 1958, and we get astronomers and astrologers. We get psychics. We have people that spiritualists. We've had a Mayan healing doctor that came during the summer solstice for quite a few years, actually. And also was another medicine person, a medicine man from down in Peru, actually, that was up too. And they came for several years, and they did some ceremonies on the site. The smoke, they did and I missed it because I was on the road. I worked for an airline, so I was gone during one of them. But they do come to our site for sure, absolutely.
I'd love to hear the background of it, how it was discovered, and what the process has been that has led to this now being a very interesting, fascinating, controversial, basically tourist attraction.
Yeah, it's been known for a couple of centuries. The Paddy family first bought the land from the Haverhill Proprietors. It was actually part of Haverhill, Massachusetts at one time, and part of Methuen, Massachusetts. before they actually settled on the border of New Hampshire. And the Patty family were shoemakers, 5 generations of shoemakers. And it was the third generation in 1734 that bought the property. And we think right after that time period, they built a house up there on top of the ruins, which is kind of unfortunate because it disturbed the site. And 2 more generations lived up there. There was originally Seth Patty, the grandfather we call him, and then the son, Seth Patty, and then Jonathan Patty. And we talk a lot about Jonathan. And he's the one that was an abolitionist. He took in the town paupers or poor people for several years in the 1830s. And he was a tax collector, and of course he was a shoemaker. And he had a wife named Betsy, and he had, he had 4 daughters and 2 sons, I believe. He actually had a lot of the site taken away, we think. Either he did or his son. They took a lot of the site away, and it's estimated about half of the site's missing today. And they used the rock for building material in the local area. They took the big slabs, they used them for bridges, and they used them for foundations, and they basically caused a lot of damage to the site. So rather than the Patty family really building the site, it appears they were tearing it down and removing quite a bit of the stonework. So a lot of damage was done. So we know the Patty family knew about the site. They probably had no idea what it was, and it was many, many years later that people actually got serious about investigating it. It was during the 1930s, many years after the Patty family, that they began actually taking the site, looking at it, trying to figure out who built it, how old it was. And so it's been going on for about 80 years of research, actually. And my family got involved with it back in the 1950s, actually. My dad, Robert Stone.
Well, I guess the biggest question in my mind right now is, why was it built? What's the reason for it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It does appear to be probably a religious site, again, and archaeologically, all the work they've done on it over the years, they have found tools, utensils, and a few possible weapons, possibly like arrowheads and that kind of thing, knives and stuff like that. Maybe not weapons, but maybe they were used for hunting or something like that. But a lot of stone kind of artifacts found on the site. And it doesn't seem to be a place where people actually lived. So it's pretty clean archaeologically. Like even the megalithic sites of Europe, you find that they were fairly clean archaeologically, and the people lived in wood, hide, or bark structures in the area away from like Stonehenge. And they've identified some of these areas, but they kept the sacred sites pretty pure. They didn't want to contaminate them with a lot of debris, and by living that close to them. I think the only site that I can think of in Europe that was actually a living site made out of stone is Skara Brae in Scotland. There may be a few others, but that one's I'm quite aware of it. And it looks a lot. It does have resemblances to our site, but it was a living site, a habitat site versus more of a religious site.
Oh boy. Because I'm looking at this, I'm just trying to make heads or tails of who built it, I guess, is what the old boy was about. Because I see one article here, and they credit the Celts, of all people, for building it. Do you believe the Celts built this? I mean, I have a hard time believing that portion of it.
Right. Research by Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard University. And he was from New Zealand originally, and he went to school in England, got his doctorates in invertebrate marine zoology, came to the United States, and he taught at Harvard University for 20 years. But his application was actually ancient inscriptions and migrations of people, and he started a group called the Epigraphic Society, and I think they had over 1,000 members at one time, and there's still the Western Epigraphic Society, and they study ancient markings in Iraq, North, Central, and South America. And, they research them, study them, and try to identify what they are, compare them to Old World script, that kind of thing. And what Barry Fell identified on our site, and some of these stones were found well before he visited us in 1975. They were, in fact, a few were on display in our museum as unknown markings. And he identified Phoenician writing, Libyan, and Celtic writing on our site, according to him. And all the way out to Alberta, Canada, down to South America, he's found these inscriptions, and up into Maine and up into the maritime provinces of Canada. There are some markings also that he studied. You would think the style of the writing, he believes, came from the Iberian Peninsula. It was like a melting pot. The Phoenicians were there, the Libyans were there, the Celts were there, and they were multilingual. And you think that they came from there and came to the New World. And that was his theory because it was very controversial. It still is. But the markings are there. Now, who made them, I don't know, and I'm not an epigrapher, but other people have studied them, other researchers, and it's been both, pro and con. They argued with Barry Fell. Some believe in. So it is an interesting thing, the inscriptions. But Barry Fell also identified a lot of place names in New England, too, mountains, rivers, valleys, and gorges. And he found that these names that are not only Native American, but the same word, the same meaning behind it, like Merrimack River, Amistad River, Mount Monadnock, Portakeechee Gorge up in Vermont, Lake Nipmuc up in Vermont, they have a certain meaning behind them, and he found that these are the same as the Gaelic words, the same word with the same meaning behind it on both sides of the ocean. So he has list upon list of these words.
So it might hold. It might hold a little bit of water, the Celtic.
Possibly. I mean, they may have traveled, with the Phoenicians across the Atlantic. And one of the theories is they came to the New World and they were bringing copper back from the New World back to the Old World, and it was during the Bronze Age was happening, and it was they would take copper, of course, with tin and make bronze, and it was precious as gold. And Barry Fell felt they were bringing it back from Lake Superior. And Isle Royale up there, you probably heard of that.
Oh, yes, I am by Duluth, in fact, so I know the area real well.
Exactly, yeah, that's one of the sources, I think, of one of the materials. But Barry Fell thought they brought back not only copper, but many other types of goods to the Old World. There was a trade going back across the ocean, and they used the oceans as highways, not as barriers.
Sure.
And so they came outside of the Gates of Hercules, and they went up into Cornwall, England. They got tin, and they may have made it into Scandinavia. I was just flying on a co-pilot. It was from Sweden, and he was we flew for a couple of days ago discussing all of this. And he when he grew up, he learned a lot of this, and he's even aware that the Phoenicians may have made it into Scandinavia. Over here we don't hear that, but over there they're quite aware of that. The Phoenicians traveled quite extensively, much more than we used to think they did. Or in other groups of people too.
What time frame would this have been?
Barry Fell puts it back, I think, around 3,000. Roughly 3,000 because of the style of the writing, somewhere around 3,000 years before present, I think, and maybe a little bit earlier. But there's a little bit of a gap because our site, we think, dates back to about 4,000 years when they constructed it, and that was based on astronomical research, and it was also based on radiocarbon-14. And also, we have a researcher that's been with us since 1978, and he's a master stone mason. He's worked in British megalithic sites and medieval sites. And he's also a doctor of historical anthropology and a doctor of theology, but and he goes to Scotland quite a bit. But he said that the stones, the big slabs on the hilltop, were taken from the bedrock at our site. They were actually somehow get into the bedrock. It's foliated, so it comes up in layers. And we're not sure how they actually were able to separate the stone, but they did, and they didn't use metal tools. And then once they got the stone off the bedrock, they would prop it with a large stone, and they would start working to shape it or dress the stone. And then these stones, in turn, were dragged to the site, and they were set up on top of the structures of roof slabs. Some of these weigh up to 14 tons. They're used for the sacrificial table. They're used for wall slabs, and also some of the astronomical alignments. My son, more recently, in the last couple of years, was up there doing more cleaning around the hilltop for some of the alignments, and he discovered about another dozen of these stones that we weren't even aware of that were actually lifted off the bedrock, propped, and they were abandoned, which is kind of interesting. It looks like it was a work in progress for a much larger site, a much larger construction, and they walked away from it, it appears, and that was kind of a surprise.
Some have actually noted that it is really a giant map of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, there was I think there was a book put out several years ago about that, and it was a map to help navigate across the Atlantic Ocean. It's kind of an interesting theory. I don't know how you really prove that, but it was interesting, and he had some points in there and some data in there showing how it worked. But I don't know if that was what the walls were used for up there. But the walls do form an interesting arrangement. They cover over 110 acres up there. Mm-hmm. They sit on the bedrock, and over the years, the soil very slowly has been covering them. It's about an inch accumulation every century. That's the average rate of accumulation in New England, basically, and so the walls are slowly getting buried. But when the site was built, it was a fairly bare hilltop, and that's not just kind of our opinion. There was a present New Hampshire Archaeological Society took about 10 years to do about 100 shovel test pits, or STPs, up there, a 50-centimeter diameter hole, and it went down to the hit bedrock or pre-occupational level like glacial soil. And what they discovered was, besides fire pits and a wigwam site and a couple other really interesting things, was that the hilltop was about 75% bare if you go back roughly 4,000 years. So it was a pretty open hill, pretty bare, which made it nice to look at the astronomical rising and setting. And also, there's a whole network of underground drains on the hilltop. They engineered a whole series of, we think they're water drains. They may have had maybe more of a spiritual purpose, but they work to keep the place dry.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have soil and trees and vegetation like we have up there today to absorb the water. It puddles up on the bedrock, and it just stays there. So they created a whole network of drains. So without soil, it kind of makes sense. You could see the alignments, and they needed a drainage system up there, and that seems to work.
It's really elaborate how they put it together. I mean, what goes through my head too, I guess, is why was it abandoned so suddenly? Then, I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, I'm surprised they'd leave it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, they would put so much work into it, and I think they had much bigger plans. And when my son Kelsey was up there, discovering, and we knew some of these stones in the 1970s, and these big slabs were out there. And that gentleman, that master stonemason, we showed him. He had been gone for a few years. He'd been teaching, and he's been away from the site for a few years. We showed him some of the more, recent finds of these big slabs, and it was quite a surprise. So it's like another story. Like why did they? They had a much bigger thing, and then something caused them to leave this site, abandon it. So that's a really big question. We really don't know. It became kind of a bigger mystery, actually.
Yeah, it is, because a lot of people still wonder why, even the Mayans left so suddenly too. So I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions why some of these ruins and structures are just left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And all throughout New England, actually, there are other sites. And back in the 1930s, when the first researcher was working on the site, he knew of about maybe about a dozen of these sites located all over the New England landscape. But since that time, it's discovered somewhere, and this would include actually part of Canada and down into New York, New Jersey. They found roughly about 800 sites, stone sites that are kind of mysterious. Who built them, how old they are, and some of the changes are quite similar to ours. Dry stone construction, big, gigantic roof slabs, standing stones, and they've done a lot of study on these too, and they found that these have alignments with the sun, moon, and stars also. And some of these have the inscriptions just like our site, particularly up in Vermont, up in the Woodstock, Vermont area, Calendar 1 and Calendar 2 site. They found inscriptions in those chambers too, which is kind of neat.
That is really cool.
Mm.
This guy in 2002, the Boston University archaeology professor, Curtis Runnels, in theory, refuted the theory, really attacked the theory that the site might have been built by the Celts. What were his main points against that?
I've heard of him, but I don't know what points he was actually making. There's different theories, such as the site was built by the Patties. The first researcher up there, William Goodwin of Hartford, Connecticut, started in 1936. He thought it was the Irish called the monks. Initially, he thought it was the Vikings. That as he began clearing out all of the debris and rubble, he thought it was Irish called the monks. Some people said that he built the site, and because we have photographs predating Mr. Goodwin. And then other people thought, well, maybe the Native Americans were involved with the building of the site. And we know Native Americans were on the hilltop. We have found a wigwam site right down by our visitor center, as a matter of fact. And we did 2 carbon datings, about 2,000 years old and 1,700 years old. And we found the grease from cooking still in the soil. And it was about a 30-foot diameter wigwam. And opposite where that's located in the western part of the hilltop, it's called the Spigot River. It runs into the Merrimack River and runs out to the ocean. Right above the Spigot River, there's a glacial cliff shelter, and it's beautiful. And in the 1950s, they found pottery, and we had that on display. It's Middle Woodland period pottery, and it dates to about that same time period as the wigwam. So Native Americans were there for sure, but did they actually build a site? That's, were they involved with any of the construction? It is possible, but the dating does go back about twice as old as that, to about 4,000 when the site was built. But Native Americans have been in New Hampshire at least between 10 and 12,000 years. And in fact, one of the oldest sites in New Hampshire for Native Americans is just above the White Mountains, where it's just after the glacial period ended, and there were still very harsh conditions up there, and they were surprised that anybody could survive up there at that early time, that far north, up in the, in the high elevation of the White Mountains. But it's up in Jefferson, New Hampshire. So, was anybody here 4,000 years ago? That's a question we get out of the museum all the time. Yes, people here thousands and thousands of years before the time period we're talking, 4,000 years. Many
but
years
this
before that.
puts everything before Columbus, and we all know that Native Americans were here. Excuse me. But the Celts and other civilizations weren't supposed to be here. Chris Columbus, when I was in school growing up, was supposed to be the only one to find America first. Now, this seems to shoot holes in that entire argument, that maybe Chris Columbus was not the first one to find America.
Absolutely, that's what we were taught, that Columbus was the first, and, part of the problem is Native Americans been here for over 10,000 years, but the Vikings actually were proven to be in North America, up in Canada, Alonzo Meadow and Newfoundland. Back in 1960 to 63, the husband and wife team, Helga and Anna Stein, found the evidence up there, actually, up in Newfoundland. The Vikings were there 500 years before Columbus. But there was a gentleman from Harvard University, Samuel Eliot Morison, and he wrote Admiral of the Ocean Sea and European Discovery of America, some of the books he wrote. And he coined a term, I believe it's called NEPCO, No Explorers Before Columbus. And he was just one of the people that believed that. And the head of the Smithsonian at the time said the same thing. But anything that's before Columbus, that's old world. You have to just start it. You'll ruin your career if you talk about it. And along comes the Vikings. It kind of messed it up a little bit. But Samuel L. Morison did say he thought probably there might have been some people before Columbus, possibly, but they were not of any consequence, not of any importance.
What do you mean they're not of any importance? I mean, they were there and they did stuff and they had a civilization. Yeah. That's bunk. That is important in my book. I mean, right? So. I mean, I would want to be important if I was there first. I'm just going out on a limb there.
The Vikings coming across the ocean, I mean, that's quite an adventure across that North Atlantic. That's not very insignificant, right? Exactly.
If I was the Viking people, I'd be awfully angry right now. Going, what
the
hell?
I am the Viking people, and I am angry.
I'm a Minnesota Viking fan, if that matters.
It's about time.
Well, I'm a Viking fan.
I am a Viking.
Well, Ragnar, tell us.
Ragnar he's going to get miffed, and he's going to come and do mean things to these people. Yeah, I don't think there's any much question at this point that it has been proved that the Vikings got at least that far. Hey, does this tie in any way to all that's been going on with the Oak Island investigation and the treasure and the hole and all that? Does this relate in any way, shape, or form to that?
I don't know of any direct relationship. Unless you are aware of any. I'm not. I mean, it is. The Oak Island is fascinating. It's just one of those mysteries. And I mean, I don't know that. We don't know what's in it or how old it is. There's a lot of theories and people's opinions of that. But there are some things up there in Nova Scotia, like the Yarmouth Stone, which may be runic. And then that New Ross Island might be a foundation for Sir Henry Sinclair. That's one of the theories. Sir Henry Sinclair coming over in his Oak Island, part of that Sinclair coming over here, bringing treasure and putting it in there and burying it. I mean, that's one of the theories that's going on right now, I guess. But I think it would be a later time period, much, much later than our site. But it's still very important. It's a big mystery for sure. But I think the time period's a little bit later than ours.
Well, certainly, I think if you're dating it that 4,000 or 3,000 year range, yes, of course, that would be really different. That really does bring up my next question. How is it possible, I guess, really, to determine not the age of the stones, of course, because that's a kind of a separate matter, but to determine when they were built? I mean, when they were maneuvered and manipulated and arranged. How can you date that aspect of it versus just the age of the stones themselves?
Yeah, one's geological, of course, like you mentioned, and the other one's archaeological. And the geology is very fascinating to us, but it's the archaeological thing that's very important to the site, how old. And they've done it. They started in 1967, actually, doing radiocarbon-14 dating on materials such as a piece of root that was growing through a wall. also charcoal from different parts of the hilltop, including the main site. And we have taken 16 carbon datings up there since 1967, almost 50 years ago. I don't know. It takes a little while to explain this. I don't know if you're going to be going to a break.
Yeah, we got break here. In fact, why don't we go to break right now? And when we come back, we can explain a little bit more, and we can also start getting to emails, because I'm getting a ton of them here. So I want to thank everybody for giving us some emails over at AfterHoursAM.com. So we'll be right back right after this.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
My backyard.
Oh, your backyard. Try telling a bear that.
I did, and this bear talked back.
Talking bear, that's rich.
No, wait, it was Smokey Bear.
Smokey? Why didn't you say so?
I did say so.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste.
No, boy.
He told me to burn legally and responsibly, and to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
And as always, he's right. You know, 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Yeah, I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
As usual, the talking bear gets all the credit. Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. Only you can prevent wildfires.
America's Most Haunted, The Secrets of Famous Paranormal Places is now an epic book from Berkeley Penguin. History, legends, investigations, interviews, and profiles of America's 10 most haunted hotspots by Eric Olson and haunted housewife Teresa Archie. Be sure to join us on Twitter and Facebook at AM Haunted, Pinterest at America's Most Haunted, and our website, americas-most-haunted.com. And here every week on America's Most Haunted Radio with all the top names in the paranormal field.
Hi, I'm Kip Parker.
And I'm Charlie Parker.
And we're the Parker Brothers. Hey, Charlie, what's missing from our game catalog?
I don't know, Kip. Tell me.
Well, you can't talk to the dead.
You sure as hell can.
That's why we got this brand new game called Ouija.
Ouija? Well, break that down for me.
Well, it's Wii because you're having a great time. And G, it's because G, aren't you having a blast because you're having a good time with the Wii.
It looks like it smelled like a Chinaman got caught in there.
Don't question it.
Well, Ouija, Kip, tell me about it.
Well, inside the package comes a flat board with all the letters of the alphabet, numbers from 0 to 9, and a yes-no written out by itself.
Well, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on.
It's got a lot of stuff going on indeed, Charlie. It also comes with this planchette which hovers over the letters the dead are trying to tell you.
Well, how does that work, Chip?
Well, you ask the question, and then the dead move your hands in the direction of the answers.
That sounds like a heck of a way to find Grandpa's slave money.
Turns out it was in the attic. But the questions don't have to be as serious as slavery. You can also find out if Sally's got a crush on you. The dead like to answer all sorts of trivial questions.
Feels like they'd have better things to do with their time, Kip.
No, lost souls are lost forever, and they're really glad to help.
Well, gee, Kip, can't you just get any sort of board with numbers and letters and talk to the dead?
The dead prefer quality like anybody else. Quality you can only find at Parker & Parker.
The Ouija board, brought to you by the Parker Brothers, available in both white and colored wallworks. Separate but equal savings.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
I got a rather serious problem over here.
All right, what are we looking at?
Cranky mother-in-law asleep on the couch in the man cave.
Dear God.
It gets worse.
That's impossible.
She's passed out on the remote.
I stand corrected.
But what do I do?
Okay, I want you to grab a Torrin Big Red hydraulic bottle jack.
Okay.
Now you wedge that bad boy in under your mother-in-law and crank her up skyward.
It's working. And got the remote.
Great. Now grab that Torrin Big Red 2-ton folding shop crane and put that woman on wheels.
And away we go.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com. welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and my co-host, my awesome, beautiful co-host, Eric Olson, is right there in the co-host seat next to me. And when we were leaving, Eric, you had a question, and he's finishing the thought. Why don't you go ahead and ask that question right from the top?
Alrighty then. Well, we were trying to figure out how do we determine the age of any given, actually, construction versus the materials. I certainly understand how they can age and date and carbon dating and whatnot, various other techniques. The age of the building material, i.e. the stones. But how do you figure out how old the actual construction is?
Well, that's the important thing, of course, is to know when the structures were actually built. And in 1967, there's a chamber called the Chamber in Ruins. It's right in the middle of the site. It's one of the bigger chambers, and it has a very large roof slab that has fallen in, possibly from an earthquake a long time ago. We don't know exactly when. But the chamber is orientated like the rest of the site, true north and south, east and west. It has one doorway. It has two windows on it. On the north side of it, in 1967, they began an excavation. I think it was 5 feet by 5 feet. These meters squares today, but that's what they're using at the time. And they began digging down, and what they were looking for was a piece of tree. They knew from the 1930s, from photographs taken by Mr. Goodwin, and actually his photographer, Malcolm Pearson, was the one that actually took the photographs, of a large pine stump that was there. And in the 1930s, they estimated the pine stump was probably growing in the late 1600s because of its state of decay and the size of the stump. They really couldn't do tree ring dating because it was so rotted. But 30 years later, they were digging down, and they actually were able to find a piece of the root. And the root had penetrated the wall of the north wall of the Chamber of Ruins. You don't really build the structure around the tree. The trees grow through the structures, basically. So the first thing that was there was that the wall was there, and then the tree, at some time in the past, had grown through the wall. And they took this piece of root, they sent it to Geochrome Laboratories down in Cambridge, Mass. And the result of that was it dated to 1690 A.D., plus or minus, I think, I believe it was like 50 years.
Oh, wow.
So look at that just about around the time, just before the Paddies actually arrived, the plus or minus, but 1690. And I think it was plus or minus 30 years, I think. So it puts it back just before the Paddy time period. But very close to it when the Paddies bought the property. And so that was interesting. It actually shows that the structure was there before, long before the Jonathan Paddy or Seth or even the grandfather had bought the land. It was just before that time. 1969, they continued the excavation, and they worked on that for several years, and they found some charcoal. It was actually like a layer of charcoal from a forest fire, maybe natural, perhaps man-made, but it was undisturbed, and it was right up against the wall, and you had the layers of stratigraphy. Thomas Jefferson kind of discovered that, and the older something is, if the soil's undisturbed, the older it is. But as they went down, they found the charcoal, and they dated this charcoal using the same laboratory to about 3,000 years old. It was like 995 BC plus or minus. It might have been 100 years. Below that, in 1971, they dug down and they found more undisturbed soil with charcoal in a layer, or horizon, I guess, and they dated that to about 4,000 years. Below that, they had discovered that the bedrock had been removed. The first thing that happened there is somebody had removed the bedrock, probably used that material for building the structure. Then they built a wall over that newly exposed bedrock, and then very slowly over the years, the soil built up, and then you had this charcoal layer, and then you had more charcoal, and then you had the tree much later in time. But in that same mix there, they found hammerstone, rubbing stone, and a stone, it was a scraper, I think, in that same stone tools, basically, right down there with the charcoal in that same level. Mm-hmm. So you didn't really date the stone. What you did is you dated a layer of soil undisturbed up against the chamber, actually. So the first thing was the bedrock removed, the wall was built in the rest of the chamber, and then very slowly the soil's building up, and you can date those different levels, right? And they were undisturbed right up against the wall. If the wall had been built later and that chamber had been built later, you would have disturbed the layer stratigraphy. You would have destroyed it, basically, by digging a hole in the ground, putting the wall in there, and the soil would have been all mixed up, and that's not the case. So the wall was first, the levels of soil were a later time period.
So
that's kind of how we dated that. But But 7 years later, well, actually back in 67, we began also looking at the astronomical alignments. We knew the stones were all out in the woods out there, and we began actually, we thought they might be aligned with the sun possibly, and that was triggered by that 1965 CBS special Stonehenge. It was based on a book by Gerald Hopkins, Stonehenge Decoded, and kind of, triggered that. People said, gee, I wonder if these stones way out, they're like 500-600 feet or further from the main site. They're vertical, they're standing up. Do they have a significance? Is there anything important about them? So the first one they worked on was, as we know today, is a winter solstice sunset. And so they began clearing out hundreds and hundreds of feet of trees so we could actually watch the event with the sunrise or sunset. In this case, it was a sunset. And the weather didn't cooperate, though, so we had to wait 3 years till 1970. And I was up there with my dad, another researcher, a manager of the site, and another friend of mine. We all went up there. And the guy actually brought his homemade wooden snowmobile up there to help break the trail because there was snow up there. And we got up there, and we waited, and fortunately the weather was beautiful, and we took a whole sequence of pictures of the sun setting. It went right over the stone, and we may have been the first people to see it, and perhaps, thousands of years to actually watch that.
That's really cool.
Pretty cool, yeah. It was pretty cool.
Now, have you guys found any crystals or anything on the site?
Yeah, actually, there's two wells, two man-made wells, stone line. One of them is called the lower well, and of course the other one's the upper well. And the upper well is on the main site, and it's about 22 feet deep. It's been cleaned to the bottom. My dad did that in 1963. It was full of debris and everything. And they cleaned it out. It took quite a while to get all the debris out of it. And what they found at the bottom was actually quartz crystals at the bottom. And the bottom of the well gets quite large. And it's almost like a vein of quartz crystals down there. And these are on display in our museum today. So, yes, they were not just quartz, but quartz crystals were found. And that well does not have a vein of water. There's no natural spring of water. The only thing that you get water in there is from rain or when the snow melts. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a mine shaft. Or, we're not really sure. It doesn't seem to have any other purpose. And there's a very thin wall between the well itself and what we call the Megaron area. So when the water gets too high, it actually just leaks into what would have been the basement of the patty house. It would have flooded it, Got too much water in there.
Well, because
so it looks like a mine shaft.
There has also been, earthquake lights have been reported in the area. What exactly are those?
Yeah, that piezoelectric effect, I guess, where you bend, and you get energy out of the... if you bend quartz, you get energy out. Or if you put energy into quartz, it bends kind of.
Gotcha.
There is a fault line right through the center of the hill. I mean, it goes right out to the Clinton-Newbury fault line, and that's it's an important one in New England. That I guess it's been dormant for quite a long time. But we actually have it running the whole hilltop where America's Stonehenge is split right in half. And it kind of runs east and west. If you go to the east, you end up in the Clinton-Newbury fault line. And you can actually see the whole thing split. You can actually, when you take a tour of the place, we pointed out on the tour guide maps where you can see the whole thing. It's pretty cool. They actually took advantage of that, the builders, because that formed a nice straight edge on one of the surfaces when they removed the stones for building. One of the edges was that fault where it cracked the bedrock and made a beautiful straight edge on it. So as they lifted the bedrock up, that natural crack was already there, and it goes way down into the earth, So they were straight. They took advantage of that, basically.
That's really cool. That is cool. It's science, man. Science is cool.
Go back to we were talking about the 4,000-year-old carbon dating, but we decided in 1973 that we had cleared out a few more of these avenues, and it took like a year to clean shafts. We had volunteers doing it with chainsaws and axes, and it was a lot of work. And
yes. Slave labor. I love it. Or AKA volunteers.
Yeah. We had a few, but it took a long time, and by 1973 we realized that we got to get a survey team up here, professionals, to survey these walls and these standing stones. And we did, and it took about 4 years because it was done on donations, and they come and do it, and then we pay them, and then they come back, months later to do some more. And we have all the information on what type of equipment to use, the theodolite to use, and the Texas Instrument calculator. Anyway, they took all this data by 1977, and they had sent it to the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge, Mass. And they ran it through their computer, and they said that if these alignments were used, if these stones were used for alignment purposes, they would work about 1800 BC, plus or minus about 200 years. And that was real exciting news to us because the carbon dating in 1971 of the chamber put it back to about 2000 BC. And the astronomical data seem to support that date. And that's because the Earth's tilt is very slowly changing up and down the obliquity changes.
Sure.
And so the question is, when would it work? Well, it would work about almost 4,000 years ago. And so the carbon dating and that seem to agree with one another.
That is really cool because it still supports the fact that there's civilization before Columbus here.
Mm-hmm.
That-
Well before Columbus.
Way before. I mean, like,
I was
way,
able
way.
to dig up what the archaeologist had said back in 2002 that, in his mind anyway, refuted the old world Bronze Age thing. And basically his main point is simply saying there haven't been any real artifacts found. A, is that true? And B, do you think that precludes it from having been a Bronze Age, old world settlement of some sort?
Oh, yeah, at our site, yeah. Goodwin found in his book called The Ruins of Great Ireland in New England, written in 1946, he does show a couple of metal implements. We don't have them today. He was from Hartford, Connecticut. The Goodwins of Hartford are very famous, very prominent family. His first cousin was J.P. Morgan, and actually they have an antique collection still set up at the Wadsworth Antitheum in Hartford between J.P. Morgan and Goodwin. But Morgan, I think, died in the 20s, I think, and Goodwin died in 1950. But there are artifacts that he found, or he hired a crew there to actually work on the site because he wasn't always able to come up from Hartford. And that became even more true as World War II began, gas rationing, and even paper to print this book became hard to obtain. But he wrote a couple books, The Truth About Leif Erikson, The Ruins of Great Ireland in New England, where he thought the Irish monks had come over. And he has photographs of some artifacts that we've never seen before. They've disappeared. And one of them looks like a bronze dagger. There's like some sort of another, I don't know what type of artifact it was. A couple of different metal artifacts that are no, just like a fragment. There's another fragment he found that have been found, but not a quantity of them on the hilltop. Definitely not. Just a few metal artifacts, and we don't even have them to examine today, unfortunately. But they're in the book. You can see the photographs of them.
Any bones uncovered from human beings at all?
The bones in New England, and our archaeologist that was there during the 1990s, she's still around. She's a president of the New Hampshire Archaeological Society. Says in New England, basically, the bones will dissolve in just a few hundred years due to the acidity in the soil.
Okay.
And up to about 1,000 years, maybe. So you're lucky to find bones that are a few centuries old. However, the chambers up there, like the east-west chamber, it runs true east and west out of true north. It has a very strong resemblance to the gallery graves. They're found in France, northwestern Ireland, and in Holland. And in Holland, the Netherlands, they have a Dutch name, which I can't pronounce. They always run true east and west. They run 20 to 60 feet in length, approximately, and they were used as burial tombs. And when Mr. Goodwin came along, they cleaned out the site pretty much using, shovels, and they used scrapers, and they used trowels, but they didn't have the technology that we have today. It would be a much slower process today. They'd have a lot of videotape, they'd have a lot more photographs, diagrams, which they did do some of that. We do have some of that. But the soil would be actually sent to a laboratory, and they would check it chemically to see if it has any traces of human, different chemicals that the body leaves behind. I think calcium, potassium, I think there's a few other trace elements. I'm not that familiar with all of it. But
Sure.
they would actually examine the soil and say, hey, there's something in the soil that indicates it was a burial at one time. We didn't have that technology back in the 1930s and early 40s, or even carbon dating, that wasn't around then.
Well, I was going to say, if you found any bones, I mean, you'd be able to carbon date it, and plus, you might be able to tell the ethnicity of the person. Whether it be
Absolutely.
European or Native American, and that would lend even more credibility to the fact that there were European influences before Columbus showed up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wish we could find that. Some soils will preserve bones better. It's so much acid in the soil up in the New England area that it just dissolves them fairly quick. But that'd be great if we could find. Only about 1% of the hilltop since 1936, when Goodwin came along, has actually been excavated. So there's a lot. It's a lot up there. We've had ground penetration radar. We've used that. Actually, it's made in our hometown here by a company, Geophysical Survey Systems. And they've been making that equipment for decades. And they moved downtown from where they were. They were right across the street from us. And they bring it up there, and they're using it up there. And we found a couple of interesting fire pits. We found what could be another underground chamber, which we've never actually attempted to dig out. They said, you've got a huge cavity up here. It's just to the west of our site. We thought it was solid bedrock, and they said, no, it's hollow under here. So it's either something archaeological or geological.
What are you going to do, Dennis, if you come across treasures of untold wealth looking in one of those cavities? Would you tell anybody?
I changed my phone number first, I guess, huh?
you would have relatives you'd even know you had. I'm your 12th cousin.
Really quiet.
yeah. And wouldn't that be great though, to unearth just all this gold, and next thing you know, the guy's a national treasure all over you. Nick Cage is your new best friend. All that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, you'd have so many friends, you would know what to do. Everybody would be a friend or a relative. That
you gotta make that third one, man. I'm so mad.
Tell me, if you did find it, would you want a stepson? Because I'd be available for that.
Oh, okay. We'll give you an allowance, right?
Hey, I'm down for that.
Well, you might have some money to do more research. That's the thing. It takes a lot of money to do research up there, and then when you have a carbon dating, it costs hundreds of dollars, and survey work was very, very expensive too, but and there's so much more to do. That chamber in ruins is where the 2 tablets were found in 1964. We talked about the north wall being carbon dated and with the root growing through it, but in 1964 they were inside of it, underneath that fallen roof slab. Actually, there's a lintel and a roof slab that fell into it, probably from one of the many earthquakes that struck the area. And they found 2 tablets, and they put them on display in the building as unknown writing. And Barry Fell identified one of them as Phoenician, and it said dedicated by the Canaanites on behalf of Belos, I guess the sun god. And the other one was Libyan, but it was broken, and it was pretty worn, Although the roof slab probably protected them somewhat over the years, eventually it fell in, and then they were more exposed to the elements. But they're still on display in our museum. We don't know exactly if Barry Fell was correct. But Libyan and Phoenician tablets are kind of triangular, maybe about a foot across, were found in that chamber. Our next goal is to take that roof out of there someday. They started in 1964 when they found those 2. They never had the resources to get the stone out of there. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the people or the money to get the stone out of there. They'd like to remove that and do an excavation and the interior of that, and then put the roof back on it eventually. And actually, it's kind of an interesting structure because it has 2 windows made out of stone, a doorway, and it has corbelling, that kind of inverted layer, kind of an inverted staircase kind of construction technique. On all 4 corners, there's this corbelling, which is rather unusual. I think Calendar One site up in Vermont has that same feature, but it's very, very unusual, kind of an architectural style. And, something we just noticed over the last few years, it's been sitting there, and as you look at it closer and closer, it's like, well, isn't that interesting? It's a kind of a neat feature. But that's just one of the many interesting structures. And that main site's about 1 acre, surrounded by about 20 acres of where the astronomical alignments, and that's surrounded by about maybe 80 acres of where the quarried stones are, a workshop area, the glacial cliff shelter is, and the wigwam, where we found the remains of a wigwam. So about 110 acres is pretty much the whole hilltop where this whole complex is.
Wow. I mean, that's huge. That's a lot of acreage. No wonder why you have so much snowshoeing. Got all that trails.
Yeah, you're right. We opened up a lot of the trails for that. Some of them are old logging trails, and we know a Native American path actually goes by called the Pawtucket. It's a Native American trail. It goes right by a hill. In fact, there's a road right there that back in the 1980s they called Pawtucket Lane, named after that Native American trail. It goes right by the west side of our property, actually, very close to us.
That I'm just looking at some of the stuff you have on your website, and everybody should go check out the website, of course. And you guys have a museum there, of course. Stonehengeusa.com is where you want to go and check it out. You guys have a lot of cool things going on over there. Now, tell us a little bit about the museum you guys have going there.
Yeah, it was opened in 1958. The actual building, I think, was built around the end of 57. So by December of 58, we opened it to the public. So we're going on our 57th year. And inside of it, we have a diorama that I built while I was in college. It's a 2-scale of the top of the hill where all the astronomical alignments in the main site is kind of 3-dimensional. And I think 1 inch equals 20 feet. And I did that while I was still in college in the 1970s. As you go past that, there's a book corner on the right. We have a lot of books that talk about our site. Some were written specifically about our site. There's a lot are available on Amazon. We have a theater that holds about 55 people. We have a 10-minute video presentation. It's a nice orientation film, and it tells you all about the different theories of who could have built the site and some of the controversy and some of the artifacts. And that you'll see before you go up on the site. And there's a 4-page tour guide map that takes you all around. And it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to do the actual tour after you see the video. And we have a place where you can get snacks inside there. And then we have artifacts on display. We have an artifact room with all the artifacts. I shouldn't say all the artifacts. We have literally thousands of artifacts have been found up on top of the hill. But we put them, kind of the nicest ones out for the public, and then we rotate them. Occasionally put, ones that have been put away for a while, put them back out for the public to see. So you come in and it's a visitor center, basically. And so you visit that, and then you go up and take the tour, and then you come back down. We have the alpacas out back.
I was just about to ask, how do the alpacas fit into this whole thing?
Yeah, part of the Star Wars thing there, They look like an animal from that. They're part of the camel family and llama family. And people ask us, why we have them there. But my son got interested in them about 12, 13 years ago. He was young. And actually, most people don't realize that the alpacas are part of the camel family. And the camels and llamas were from North America.
And they love Wednesdays.
45 million years, yeah. From Florida all the way up to the Arctic Circle, they found the remains of the camels and the llamas. And they actually were adapted to cold weather up at the Arctic Circle, And they died out about between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago. So if you've gone back to that oldest carbon dating we have on the hilltop, about 7,300 years, those animals were just had become extinct, But all the camels of the world, alpacas, vicuna, guanaco, are all from North America, Canada, U.S., and part of Mexico. And I thought they were from overseas when I was a kid. And I never.
I would have thought that too. I didn't know they were native to this area.
Yeah, so it's part of the history of the prehistory or whatever of our continent. So they actually have a really nice educational value, and people love to look at them. Their fiber makes incredibly warm clothes, no lanolin, so it's not itchy. It's about 3 times warmer than some of the best sheep in the world, too. But down in South America, the Inca would only allow the royalty to use fiber from the vicuna, their cousin, or the alpaca. It's like, nobody can use it if you work hard. It was, I don't know what type of penalties you paid, but it was just reserved for the royal people.
The penalty was death.
Probably sacrifice.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's why the table's there. That's for the people that had bad fashion. Sorry.
No, that's how the emperor got his groove. So, I'm trying to zero in on this. My brain, the wheels are turning, the squirrels, the gerbils are in there running around, making that wheel go. If you were to really boil it down, it sounds to me like there's pretty good evidence that, as to the ancient nature of the site, 3,000-4,000 years. There seems to be quite a bit that corroborates that. What would you say is the main point, or are the main points in your mind that would support something other than a Native American basis or as builders? What is in your mind the really most salient points of it's not Native Americans who built this 4,000 years ago?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably the style of construction. I've been over to Europe several times. Went there back in the 70s and 80s with my dad. And the size and shape and orientation of these structures are so similar to some of the structures we saw over in Ireland and France and in Scotland and England. They're so close that it's hard to believe it would be a coincidence. And then a little bit more controversial, I guess, would be the inscriptions, and they have been found on our site, the ancient Phoenician, Libyan, and Celtic inscriptions that are found at our site as well as other places in North America. Those things, I think, probably, particularly the style of construction, that really gets me all the time, is how similar they are, And you go on to the place names that Barry Fell lists in New England, that kind of thing. Those seem to be supportive of that, Actually, there's another cool thing was they found a Phoenician coin at the mouth of the Merrimack. Now, the Merrimack comes up within 4 miles of our site, and then a tributary comes up to the west of our site, out by where that glacial cliff shelter is, called the Spigot River. And at the mouth of the Merrimack, or near it, back about 2010, they were putting a house in the soil at some depth. They found a Phoenician coin. And what was that doing there? It was pretty cool that they found it there. It's like, it's kind of circumstantial.
That's where I put that.
Yeah, what did that? Yeah, there it is. I found it. But I mean, it's there, and it's kind of like, it doesn't prove it, but it's kind of it adds to it. That maybe. And then they found other coins. If you look at the NERA, New England Antiquities Research Association's website, they have a lot of this information in there. And you look in all the different states, New Hampshire, Mass, and all that, and you go in there and you can find that they found coins up in Beverly, Mass, just north of Boston.
You find a Coke bottle buried. Those are everywhere. Doesn't matter where you dig, you find one of those.
Yeah, but it's the coins that are cool, the Coke bottle, yeah, I know. but also there's
must be crazy.
Exactly. On that note, though, go ahead,
go
sir.
ahead.
I was going to say, we got to run the break, everybody. We come back. Your emails. So we're going to get to your emails next, so don't go anywhere. More American Stonehenge with Dennis Stone right after this.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At Ace, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at Ace, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. Ace,
the helpful place.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the Wacky Waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the Wacky Waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Hello, and welcome to today's lottery drawing. Good luck. And here's today's winning numbers. First one up, it's not yours. Second one, not yours. And another number that's not yours. Okay, this is one number that's yours. It's a 5, but you don't get any money for that. And the final number is not yours.
Yep, so chances are you're not going to hit the lottery anytime soon. Don't get us wrong, the lottery can be fun every now and then. Just please don't rely on it for your future savings. How about this? Brew your own coffee at home instead of buying that latte every day. Brown bag it to work instead of ordering in. Ride your bike instead of buying all that gas. These changes alone can save you thousands a year. Thousands. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feed that piggy bank. Go to feedthepig.org for more free ideas on how to save. Feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Excuse me. Thousands of cancer patients can't afford a place to stay when the best treatment is far from home. A room shouldn't be the difference between life and death. Let's make sure that everyone who needs a room gets one. Let's make some noise. Let's help the American Cancer Society finish the fight.
Text ROOM to 41518 to donate $10.
Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com. And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and along with me,
Eric Olson.
That's right, America's Most Haunted Eric Olson. I always like to throw that in there, too. So I want everyone to go over to americasmosthaunted.com right after you visit American Stonehenge website. Check out all the cool things that are going on over there. Now, when we were leaving, I did promise get your emails. Cynthia from New Hampshire, your stomping ground, Dennis, would like to know, is there any activity from Bigfoot in the area?
Not aware of any. They have had TV shows on. I think it's on Travels. They've had something up in the New England area. There's been reports. There was a show on a couple months ago. It was kind of in this area, but I haven't seen anything on our site. We do have a Bigfoot cast my dad has in his collection, and it came from a gentleman from Keene State College, Professor Hapgood, who wrote several books back in the 1950s, and Albert Einstein actually endorsed one of them about the Earth crustal displacement theory, which is kind of cool. And Terry Reese Maps, he was involved with that, and he predicted our site back in 1960 was probably about 4,000 years old and probably visited by the Phoenicians, so he was kind of on the right track. But he got this cast. He got the cast from Sir Edmund Hillary and Marlon Perkins, and they went over to the Himalayas, I think, around early 60s to look for this Bigfoot or Yeti over there. And they actually came back with a cast, and they gave it to my dad, and it's up in our museum, actually. We have it kind of protected there. So, but I haven't seen any Bigfoot, no, unfortunately.
Do you believe in Bigfoot?
It's interesting. I would love to see the evidence that it's actually there, but there's been so many reports. It's like, so many hundreds and hundreds of reports across the nation and around the world of these things. It's hard to totally dismiss it, but they just haven't been able to bring the thing in and say, here it is, that's the problem.
I know, you would think by now they'd have a body. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the human beings like us, everywhere pretty much on the planet, you'd think that just by some dumb coincidence someone would hit it with a truck.
Right. And you have it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Come on, we hit deer all the time. Why not a Bigfoot?
The thing with our site, we can show you the Bigfoot, we can't, so it's there's no hard evidence, that's the thing about it.
No, that's the, Bigfoot is an interesting topic all on its own.
It's a thorny topic.
It is. I mean, everybody always asks, hey, is there a Bigfoot around? We don't know. We've never even seen one. I mean, really, it's still up for debate, like you'd said. And I would have to say your area is probably as prone to Bigfoot as Eric's area or my area. So no one really knows, to be honest, I guess would be my answer on that email.
It's squatchy up in here.
It's squatchy. Something smells squatchy, let me tell you. Oh, Lydia would like to know, she's from Scottsdale, Arizona. She'd like to know if there's any paranormal activity, as in ghosts, in the area.
Well, one of the visitors about 10 years ago took a picture in what we call the Patty area where that homestead was built, and it looks like, it could be just mist, but it looks just like a person. And we have had people, different psychics that have come to our site over the decades, actually. And every fall we have like a ghost hunt up there. And one of the New England Paranormal Societies does come down with all their equipment, and we usually have between 20 and 30 visitors. They pay a certain amount of money, and they go have a ghost briefing in a theater, if you will, and then they go out to the site at night for several hours, and then they have all this recording equipment and everything, and then they come back down, and then in the theater they have like a post-ghost hunt kind of briefing, and they show what they have. And most of the time I work weekends for the airline, so I miss a lot of them, but I haven't seen any ghosts myself up there. I mean, it may exist, but some of the things they showed on the cameras was kind of interesting, different kinds of orbs and lights and stuff. I don't know what that means, though, but they do it every year. And we actually had Hans Holzer. He's pretty famous. He wrote books like Of Ghosts I've Met, I guess, and he was visiting us.
I might have heard of him a couple times.
Yeah, Hans Holzer, he was there in 74, and I think he might have been there later. And when he came in 74, Betty Hill came over and visited us just to meet him. And that's the first time we met Betty Hill. And that's the UFO thing, And she was really nice. She became a friend of my mom's for years. And because in 1974, Estelle Parsons and, what was this gentleman's name? They did an NBC movie all about their interrupted journey, which took place in the early 1960s between Barney and Betty Hill.
I think it was James Earl Jones.
Yeah, James Earl Jones was the husband. That's right. You're right on that. Yep. And that's when we met her, and the movie came out just around that time also, so that was kind of cool. But Hans Holzer, yeah, he was up there, and I think he brought a psychic with him. We were going back over 40-something years ago, 41 years ago, and I was there during that. It was kind of cool.
Interesting. It's kind of cool that you got to meet all these, like Hans Holzer, which was really a founding father of the paranormal as we know it now, in a lot of ways, and then the Betty and Barney Hill story, UFO, I mean, that is the strangest UFO story and most compelling I think I've ever had the opportunity to learn about and read, and and to kind of learn about. And the thing that gets me is the physical evidence that was left behind in that case, like the watches both stopping at the same identical time. Small things, or I shouldn't say small things, big things like that. So I tend to believe that they were visited and abducted by aliens, in my opinion, those guys.
You know, and you remember she did a hypnosis, drew out a star cluster that you saw inside the UFO, so like a map. And at the time in '67, nobody knew what she was talking about. But by 1972, you know, science, astronomy had progressed, and they actually were able to identify what she had drawn, and it actually fit. You know, there's actually that whole arrangement of stars, you know, seen from a different part of the universe, I guess, and it was kind of neat. You know, maybe she was onto something. I think she had some staining on her clothes or some marks on the car, you know, left behind sort of little. But the staining on her clothes, I guess it was her dress or something. And they still have that, I guess. They saved that, and they try to identify what it was on her dress there. But
well, I don't fear aliens. I only fear the anal probing aliens.
Yeah.
You know, the rest,
you
know.
Other aliens fear the anal probing aliens.
I'm just throwing that out there. Now, working for the airline, though, and you're in the sky a lot. And I know it's dangerous to talk about this if you work in the airline, by and large. But have you ever seen anything strange in the sky?
You know, we see a lot of things. I've been flying since 1974, as a matter of fact, and got about 30,000 hours, a lot of it at night. And I've been with the airline since 1981. And you do see things. The problem is, you know, you usually see a light, and then it might be Venus. That looks really unusual a lot of times, you know, or maybe a satellite passing overhead. And you do see things, but you can't. They're unidentified in some ways because you're not really sure what you're looking at. But to go up and get closer to it, or have high-powered binoculars and say, yes, that is definitely a UFO. Especially at night, you just see a light, and it gets very bright. It could be a landing light on an aircraft. It could be a meteor. We see a lot of those. Yeah, you do see some cool things. It's not one of the ones where it's right up next to you, riding next to you with this gigantic, you know, triangular or cigar-shaped UFO, and you say, "Oh my God, look at it, it's right there." And you
see, wouldn't that be cool though if that happened to you?
Oh,
I mean, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, some pilots have said that it's happened, but not with me yet. So.
Well, I suppose it's a blessing in disguise though too, because you know it'd freak you out a little bit.
Well, the astronauts have seen things too. You know, they've reported too. You know, and Alan Shepard was actually from my hometown, and I think he actually came down, and his camp was right near here. Summer camp is right near our museum, and we think he used to play up among the stone ruins. So that's kind of cool. But some of the astronauts have reported seeing UFOs. You know, I think Cooper, I think the first 7. You know, with Shepard, I think he said when he was in test pilot school, I forget which air base it was. He said that one actually landed there, and he had the whole film of it. And the film, you know, was taken from him, and he never saw the film again. It was kind of cool. It was either Cooper or one of the original 7, anyway, astronauts. You know, so it's kind of cool.
That is cool. Can you imagine having that film of the aliens landing, getting out, sharing coffee with them, photo ops, you know,
waving with their 3 fingers?
That's right. You know, the all seeing says, you know, passing them out. You'll enjoy these later.
You know, it's funny, a lot of the skeptics, some of the scientists, you know, mainstream scientists will say, well, you know, UFOs are, you know, the imaginations and misidentifications and all that, and people would have never come from, you know, other planets to visit us. Now they're finding other planets, you know, with the Hubble and other satellites, they're finding all these other planets out there, you know, and they're starting to say, one astronomer the other day on TV said actually it was a Musgrave, the astronaut, he said something like, there's probably like 1 billion planets out there that could support life, and some of these civilizations could be millions of years in advance, so they could possibly have the technology to visit us.
Well, sure.
And in the same breath, it's like, yeah, but they haven't visited us, kind of thing. It's like, it's possible.
You know,
I mean, it's one of those things. It's kind of funny that they're starting to talk about, yeah, they could possibly visit us, but they probably haven't, you know.
Well, they're looking for intelligent life is the problem.
Well, that's the trouble, yeah. We're going to find it on Earth, too.
But another email here, and this is an interesting one. This one comes from Daniel. Daniel would like to know is whether the H.P. Lovecraft novel, The Dunwich Horror, was indeed inspired by American Stonehenge.
Yeah, we think it was. Back in the 80s, a couple of our investigators, actually in the 60s too, were looking at that. But in the 80s, we put together a little booklet, and it talks about that, the Dunwich Horror. And actually the names of the people in there are like instead of calling the Patty family, they called them something else. And there was another guy named, oh God, what was his name? He was another guy that was one of the guys that was a neighbor of this place, and they changed his name. And kind of very descriptive, you know. It sounds like he actually, and we know he visited the site. He was up there with a guy named, because he was from Providence. He was up there with a guy named H.G. Lovecraft, and I'm trying to think of the other gentleman's name, but they came up in the 1930s and visited the site.
I've never read the book, and this is actually the first, and call me a horrible, horrible person. This is the first I've actually heard of the novel. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, you know, I've heard of it more actually through the movie. And I'm thinking Dennis and I are similarly aged based on some of the milestones referenced, like being in college in the 70s. Anyway, I remember seeing.
I'm 29 years old. I'm 29.
Are you?
No.
You and I together then are my age. So, no, anyway, there was a movie, and I called that just that, Dunwich Horror. And I remember seeing it at the drive-in when I was probably, 11, 12. So I'm guessing it was late 60s, early 70s. And that's what I know. And I don't know how much fidelity the movie has to the book. You know, I knew about Lovecraft, but I really kind of didn't get into him in terms of actually reading him, because frankly, I thought he was terrifying. Just the pictures, the imagery. Until much later in life. I hadn't read any Lovecraft at all, probably till my, 40s maybe.
Really? So wasn't he actually attributed to making, or one of the founding fathers of Scientology, wasn't he? Lovecraft?
No, that's L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, Hubbard. Sorry, I knew,
he's more recent. Lovecraft was back. Lovecraft's another one of these classic, tortured writers. He was not a big success in his time. He's much bigger now than he was then. Very much like Poe, in the previous century, where he was known, he was read, but he wasn't particularly successful. He was financially not successful at all. And it's really only much later, in the last 50 years, say, when he really became fully appreciated and has, risen to the level that he is now of among the top, 5, 10 horror writers probably now of all time. And he's created this entire mythology, this mythos. And what's interesting is before there was such a thing, at least before it was called this, of fan fiction, which is so huge now, particularly because of the internet, he had an entire army of people writing fan fiction, what we would now call fan fiction, in his style, going back decades and decades and decades. So, he inspired amazing, response and loyalty, but it was really only a handful of people in his own time.
It just sucks he had to die to become famous. Come on.
It really does. Yeah. He was ahead of his time.
That's really not fair.
That happens a lot.
I feel I'm ahead of my time.
You are, Eric. You truly are. Look at you. You are a Renaissance man.
I try.
Well, props to
But
you.
I'm not that old.
No, you're not that old. You're young. You're very young. But
I'm not young, but I'm ever youthful.
Well, getting back to...
You're a guy before your time. But I think H.P. Lovecraft, was here in the 30s, and I think they have, like Eric was saying, he's very popular, like a cult thing. I think they have a convention in Mass, or something like thousands of people show up each year for it, down near Athol, where this was supposed to take place. Not in Salem, New Hampshire, where our place is, but I think it was inspired, and that they did quite a bit of research on it. They put that booklet together. We used to have that for sale in our museum, and it's been out of print for quite a while. But it was all about another gentleman named Munn that accompanied them with their wives up to our site. I think it was in the 1934-ish. I can't remember the exact date though. And I think they came once and possibly twice to our site. So I think it may have been an inspiration for that. Because a lot of stuff seems to fit. It really does fit the going over the river, which would be the Spigot River up the hill, and names and everything, except they changed the names a little bit, So it's possible, And Aleister Crowley was reported to have come to our place. I guess he may have summered at Newfound Lake up in New Hampshire, and he had a different name for that lake. It was a totally different name, but He could have visited our site. Some of those things we just don't have any evidence. Like Alan Shepard visiting our site too. We just don't have anything to hold in our hand, show you a
Sure.
picture or something like that. But
yeah,
probably possible. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I imagine everybody from P.T. Barnum to you name it visited the site.
Well, Rod Schilling did a show on us in 1970 called The Unexplained on NBC, and then Chris Spock did us in 1976 in Search Of, and Leonard Nimoy, and then William Shatner did us just a couple of years ago. So we had the whole Star Trek thing, and plus Rod Serling, do a thing on us in the past, which is kind of neat.
That is really neat. Did you ever get to meet Spock?
He came to the site. I believe he met my uncle, but I wasn't there at the time. And really, because I enjoyed the original series very much when I was a kid, I just loved it. When I was like 11 or 12, I just really enjoyed that. So I never got the chance to meet him or William Shatner, but Spock was from Boston, and they just saw him on a PBS special where he was walking around East Boston with his son, showing him all the stuff, and then because he just passes away a month ago, I guess. But,
yeah, I know. Isn't that sad? That is really sad. I mean, we lost. He was really a talent. Leonard Nimoy was more than the sum of his parts, I guess, would be the best way to put it, because I had the opportunity to interview him one time.
Oh, wow.
And he kind of, he didn't really embrace the Spock character right away. He kind of had to realize for a second, okay, because he was a photographer. He was into music. There was a lot of parts to him that a lot of people didn't know about, but the Spock kind of overshadowed everything. And in the interview, he kind of came across of wishing, I mean, the Spock thing was great, but in a lot of ways he was wishing that his other talents and his other hobbies and his other ventures would have came a little bit more to the forefront.
I think I heard that on that show too, yeah. And I think in the end he kind of sort of embraced it a little bit more. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, it came typecast, and you're Spock.
You are Spock, man. Live long and prosper, and enjoy being Spock, because you're stuck with it for a while.
Yeah, I would have loved to have met him. I think he visited, and my uncle saw him, and but that would have been neat to meet him for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because from the Stone Age to the Space Age, and he did a really neat show. And we were on 3 episodes. We were on I think the third one we were on. He had like 144 episodes over the years, from 76 to 80 something, and we were like the fourth one, I think it was, of that series on that aired.
That is really cool. Yeah. One more email. This comes Craig from Boston. He would like to know of whether you have ever found any evidence of dinosaurs, any paleontology stuff on the site.
No, not at our site, and not too much fossil in our area, but down in Connecticut, of course, Rocky Hill, that's a place where there's dinosaur tracks and everything down there. I'm trying to think of any, because Pat, the lady that worked on our site, her husband was a geologist from Tufts University. He was a doctor of geology, so I asked her that question once about finding anything in our area, fossils, and she says it's just not an area you find many fossils. It's a lot of granite. It's not the type of, geology that you'd find a lot of fossils in. So no, we haven't found them. You have to go into Connecticut, and there's probably some other places, I'm sure. Like I have a fossil of some, I think, it's like leaves, and these things are probably somebody donated to our museum. It came from Pennsylvania. Beautiful fossilized like plants on the stone. It's probably hundreds of maybe millions of years old. I didn't get a date on it, but it's beautiful. But our area really don't have that. Yeah,
it'd be cool to find diamonds. Just say it. I'm still in that whole treasure thing. I swear to God, you're going to stumble upon a treasure. I just know you are.
Well, the Native American Pass Conaway Indian chief, who supposedly lived over 100 years in our area, and he was like over 6 feet tall, he had found a silver mine, and it wasn't far from our museum. In fact, it's rumored he put his furs from his animals in some of the chambers. But again, how do you prove that? But right in our area, silver. So that's kind of cool. And because we have the quartz crystals. So there's really 2 things I think are precious in our area. There's not much gold, I don't think, or anything like that, but silver for sure, right? Not too far from us.
Well, maybe one day you can mine the silver, and, But, no, your location is really cool, and it's the only one like it, really, in America. I mean, it's the oldest structure in America.
That's what we think, yeah. It's one of the oldest in North, Central, and South America. Maybe not the oldest, but one of the oldest. But there are sites on the Hudson River. There's about 200 sites. It's the highest density of these megalithic-type chambers, if you will. And it's similar to Dublin, Ireland, on the Boyne River, where Newgrange is. There's about 200 megalithic sites. So you go down to New York City, go north a ways, and it's kind of the same thing, about 200 of these. In fact, the NERA meeting this spring will be in Kingston, New York. And they'll be doing a field trip to some of the chambers. And they've been on several TV shows they've been on, including UFO hunters, because they try to associate some of these chambers with UFOs. And they showed this chamber down there, and it has a big monolith, a very tall monolith, almost like a menhir, meaning a long stone, right in front of the chamber. So it's astronomically aligned. And then they were talking about people seeing UFOs in Europe, and they're like, oh, I never saw a chamber before, you know. But they are having a meeting this spring. It's at the end of April. It's a 3-day meeting right in Kingston, and it's a nonprofit group, and they'll be going out looking at these chambers down there. So the biggest concentration of these chambers is actually in New York. But we have one of the biggest of the sites. We have the most chambers in one area, you know, the largest concentration of structures, you know, on a hilltop, actually.
Any chance that the Mayans could have made this? I mean, they could have come this far north very easily. I mean, it's been shown that they've been in the States before the Mayans.
Well, the Mayans, you know, like Scott Walker's show talks about Mayans being in Georgia, and I don't think we mentioned on the show that when we went to the Crystal River Mounds down in Florida, 2 hours north of Tampa, that because there are mounds, there's tens of thousands of mounds in the United States, and there still are, but many have been destroyed. But all along St. Petersburg up there, those have all been destroyed. But you get to the Crystal River Mounds, not too far from the Crystal River nuclear power of a new energy versus the old. There are really neat pyramids. They're all made out of shells, millions of shells in the ridge top, conical shape, and flat top. The Mayans had a cultural influence in the stelae, the carved stones, and the pottery, and some artifacts. The Mayans made it into Florida, and I didn't know that in school, that there was a cultural diffusion going on there, exchange of goods and ideas. And then in Scott's show, he says they may have made it up to Georgia. Of course, he didn't mention I don't think they mentioned the fact they made it into Florida, which would have made it a little bit more possible, you know?
Sure.
But coming up this far north, I don't know, but the Mayans made it into the United States, it appears. At least their goods did, and some of their ideas, you know?
Yeah, I mean, those crazy Mayans, I tell you, they were everywhere.
Ranging far and wide. Hey, Dennis, we are almost to the end, and I hate to pin you down, but actually I live to pin you down.
Okay.
What, in your opinion, if you had to give your bottom line as a obviously knowledgeable, intelligent, responsible guy, you're an airline pilot, no less, what do you think is the origin of the site? What do you think is the absolutely most likely origin story of the site?
I think the people that built our site came from across the ocean, from the Mediterranean area, Western Europe, and that's because of the really close similarity of the structures. And then you have all the buried bells, which some people dismiss, but there's place names, there's inscriptions. But I think that when you look at the chambers and you look at the standing stones and the alignments with the quarter days, the lunar alignments that we have on our site, and possibly 24 star alignments at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center results, they said you have about 24. It looks so much like what you find in Europe, you know, that if it's not, it's a really big coincidence when you compare the style, shape, and size of these structures. So I think it's probably an old world. We know Native Americans were here for sure, and they may have played a part in this. But I think there's an old world, connection to our site, as well as some of the other New England sites too.
But most of the Native Americans, weren't they nomads? I mean, by and large.
Yeah, there's a Paleo, and that goes around the Ice Age, and then the Archaic time period. And they were still hunters, but they hunted with smaller implements, and they were somewhat migratory. And then you have the woodland period where pottery comes along, and they had villages, and they had mounds during that time period of the later period. And it kind of changed during the woodland period, and some people speculated, and that's around 2000 to 1500 BC, that there's a European influence, and that's why I went from archaic to woodland. Things started changing.
Well,
some of the pottery looks like on both sides of the ocean. Pottery looks almost exactly the same.
That is really, really cool. We are out of time, though. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, go to StonehengeUSA.com. Find out all you can about this site. And you, too, can go visit this site as well. They do give you tours. It's a good time. I recommend everybody check it out. But take care of each other, love each other, and Eric, thank you so much for being my new co-host. I'm really enjoying this.
My pleasure. I'm flattered. Thank you so much for asking me.
You guys take care now. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.
This show was produced by Midwest Radio Productions. For more information, go to www.midwestradioproductions.com.